Hi, I'm Ross Kenneth Erkin, personal finance editor at TheStreet.com. Today for the Moola Files, I have Rob Fishman joining me, contributing editor at BuzzFeed. Rob, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So this week you published this fascinating piece about Jason Goldman, who was instrumental in building Google and Twitter into what they are today, but he's kind of an unsung hero.
Yeah, well, more Twitter than Google. He joined Google actually as Evan Williams' office manager and sort of rose up to a place of prominence at Blogger, which was their creation at Google once Ev left. And then at Twitter he came on very early and stayed for 4 years to run product development there. I think especially at Twitter, where you had a lot of kind of figures at the top and to some extent a rotating cast of leaders, he sort of was the concierge who made sure that everything was running smoothly. And when all of these various CEOs had ideas, he was the one who stood up next and executed on all of them. And I think, compared to the very public role that a lot of them have enjoyed, his was a little bit more unsung. There weren't a ton of press articles lauding his many accomplishments, but when you speak to the people who worked at Twitter over the years, down to a one, they talk about how he was so crucial in turning it into what it is today.
What's interesting is that in other fields, politics, say, you focus on the people, the press is focused on kind of the niche players or the unsung heroes, whereas in tech journalism, we're enamored of Steve Jobs and Apple or these types of CEOs.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is, and was it to Goldman's advantage to fade into the woodwork?
Yeah, no, I think that it's, if Politico covered only Barack Obama, it would be a pretty boring read. And, to political journalism's credit, the best stories are the kind of behind-the-scenes kingmaker type, where they go in and find someone who's not obvious. And, I think the tech press, part of it is that a lot of the tech blogs, are charged with getting out 10 stories a day, and it's easy to write about the CEO because they're public. And, you saw the young founder who sold his company to Yahoo, who's younger than Yahoo is. And, he was sort of lauded across the board. And I think he's a good example of people sort of not doing the hard work, the investigation, and figuring out like what's behind this company. Later it came out that Yahoo founder, a lot of the technology he was using was potentially licensed from someone else and made it a sort of questionable acquisition. So, I think in part it's that. I think there's also a culture that celebrates the sort of CEO hero and creates this narrative around young people who learned how to code and then built something, and the prevailing narrative is that it's this sort of single-handed creation, and we rarely look beyond the sort of C-suite to figure out like, well, who's actually kind of making all of this work beyond just the first visible guy.
But it is difficult this day and age for someone to actually bring a startup to fruition. And there is this tension between people who can easily gain funding, but that's causing a talent drain, you would say, at many of these big companies. Can you talk about that tension?
Yeah, I think there's two crunches, if you want to, not TechCrunch, two trends that you call crunches. One is called the Series A crunch, and one is this sort of talent crunch. And I think that they're sort of sides of the same coin. It is hard to raise money to start a company, but it's actually it's always been hard, but it's never been easier. If you look at seed money, New York, Silicon Valley, they're all sort of awash in seed money, and investors who are kind of looking to throw $50,000, $100,000 at anyone with sort of a great idea. And I think, what people learn when they start and exit companies is that great ideas are a dime a dozen, and that it's execution that really matters. And so, the Series A crunch is that everyone's getting seed funding. You go into these meetings and say, here's a bright idea I had, and people are willing to fund you because the theory is sort of, 1,000 flowers and one of them will bloom, hopefully be the next Twitter, and the next Facebook, bloom big. So in a way, it's easier to get that kind of funding. Where it becomes very difficult in the Series A crunch, as it's called, is that getting that follow-up round is actually is more difficult than it used to be. A lot of money for early stage companies, not as much for companies that aren't showing rocket ship like growth. So a lot of them sort of quietly die is what ends up happening to a lot of those guys. And the twin phenomenon there is the talent crunch, which is, hey, if it's easy to get my idea funded, why go work for someone else? So you have all these people starting companies, and few of them are saying, hey, well, actually, like my friend over there is doing something really neat. why don't I go work for him instead of working for myself, which is what Jason Goldman has done now 3 or 4 times, has said, I'm sure he could have easily raised money to start a company, but instead he said, I want to keep working for Evan Williams and Biz Stone, who I trust, and we've had a very successful collaboration.
Speaking of big ideas, BuzzFeed has become such a phenomenon on the web, and I want to talk about API ad content and sponsored branding content that lives natively, both at BuzzFeed and Twitter. Why is this becoming such a huge phenomenon?
Yeah, I mean, without taking any credit at all, I happily write for BuzzFeed, but they've pioneered a really incredible ad model, I think, that's leading the industry. And just as an observer, I can say that, I think what they do differently, we both used to work at the Huffington Post, which was very much built around Google search. We wanted to be the best place, the first destination that anyone came to when someone searched for content. BuzzFeed's built around this whole incredible idea that not only do people find great content, but then they should go share that on their Facebook wall. And obviously that's a much more difficult proposition, but they're doing a great job in publishing content that people want to share. So the corollary to that is for advertisers to come up with their own message, I think, that's really shareable. And BuzzFeed's done a great job and has an awesome team of people who work with advertisers to, instead of creating display ads that everyone ignores, to create entire posts that themselves go viral and really, I think, disseminate the advertiser's message into social streams in a way that wasn't possible before, that's really organic, and that people, I found myself sharing a post and then realized, oh wow, it's by Red Bull, but it was about something like funny bromances, and so I think that they've been able to capture that idea that advertisers aren't necessarily content creators, but when they work with someone like BuzzFeed, they can come up with something that's very shareable. And speaking to Twitter and Facebook's ad model, those are already the social networks that people are going to 10, 11, 12 times a day. And what they've done is allowed advertisers to sort of insert their messages organically alongside within those feeds, whatever your grandma's sharing or your friend from college is.
Thank you so much for being here, Rob Fishman. Check out his article, The Silent Partner, about Jason Goldman at BuzzFeed. Fascinating read. This has been the Moola Files.